Spencer leaned back in the plush leather seat of his private jet, his mind adrift as the scenery below slowly shifted from sprawling cityscapes to familiar rustic hills. He hadn't set foot in his hometown for over a decade. As a child, he once saw it as a world full of possibilities. Now, it felt like a place full of ghosts, mainly the memory of his grandmother, the one person who had ever shown him unconditional love. The car waiting at the airstrip was as sleek and polished as the life he was leaving behind. But as he passed through the worn, narrow streets, he felt a sharp contrast. The weathered facades of small shops, the rusted signs, and the slow rhythm of the people stood in stark contrast to his usual fast-paced, opulent world. Spencer arrived at the estate that now belonged to him, a grand yet empty mansion surrounded by a sea of autumn leaves. Stepping inside, the silence felt heavy. The air was tinged with the faint scent of lavender, his grandmother's favorite. It was as if her presence lingered in every corner. That's when he first met Audrey. She was in the sunroom, cleaning the dust off an old rocking chair. Her presence was modest yet filled with a quiet energy. With a warm but composed demeanor, she approached him, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Spencer. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." Spencer responded with a curt nod, his gaze cold. "Thank you. And it's just Spencer." He tried to dismiss the pang of pain that her words brought. Audrey's simplicity was both unsettling and intriguing. Her soft, steady eyes seemed to see right through him, not to his wealth or status, but to something rawer and more vulnerable. It made Spencer feel exposed, a sensation he wasn't used to. Later that evening, as Spencer stood by a large window overlooking the estate grounds, he caught sight of Audrey walking toward the small garden at the back. The way she gently tended to the plants, something his grandmother had cherished, stirred an unexpected warmth within him. It was a rare feeling, one that he wasn't sure he wanted to confront just yet. The following morning, Spencer awoke to the soft, distant sound of birdsong mingled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He felt a strange sense of calm, so different from the bustling mornings he was accustomed to in the city. Dressed in casual clothes that felt foreign to his usual business attire, he descended the grand staircase slowly, the house's quiet stillness weighing on him. Audrey was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Her movements were efficient but unhurried, a stark contrast to the hurried pace of Spencer's usual world. The spread was simple: toast, scrambled eggs, and a few slices of fruit. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," she said with a small smile, breaking the silence. "Your grandmother always preferred a light breakfast." Spencer took a seat, feeling the discomfort of unfamiliarity mixed with an unexpected warmth. He glanced around the kitchen, noticing the small details he had missed before: a vase of wildflowers by the window, an embroidered dish towel his grandmother had likely made, and a photo of his younger self in a worn frame. The simplicity of it all brought an odd sense of nostalgia, one he wasn't quite ready to face. "Thank you," he muttered, feeling awkward and out of place. He focused on his plate, but his mind drifted to the task ahead, sorting his grandmother's possessions and finalizing her last wishes. "We have a lot to get done today," he added, trying to redirect his thoughts. Audrey nodded, her gaze softening. "Yes, there's quite a bit to organize. But we can take it one step at a time." Her voice was steady, reassuring, and for the first time, Spencer felt a twinge of gratitude toward her. They spent the morning sorting through old boxes in the attic, filled with trinkets and mementos from his grandmother's life. Each item seemed to tell a story, and Audrey was quick to share anecdotes she had heard over the years. "This was her favorite teapot," she said, holding up a chipped porcelain piece. She said it reminded her of her childhood. Spencer listened, at first with a guarded expression, but gradually, his defenses began to lower. Audrey's stories, filled with warmth and personal touches, reminded him of moments he had almost forgotten. As they sifted through dusty albums and letters, Spencer found himself opening up as well. "I remember when she taught me to play cards," he said, surprising even himself with the sudden urge to share. "We'd sit by the fire and she'd never let me win." Audrey chuckled softly, her eyes glinting with understanding. "She was a tough one," she agreed. "But she always spoke so fondly of you, Spencer. She wanted you to find happiness, not just success." Her words, though simple, hit a deep chord within him. He had never considered that his grandmother's wishes could be so different from what he had been taught by his father. The day continued in a similar rhythm, brief conversations interspersed with silent moments that felt strangely comfortable. For the first time, Spencer sensed a shift within himself, a crack in the wall he had carefully built around his heart. By late afternoon, they were at the community center, fulfilling one of his grandmother's last wishes, distributing donations to local families in need. Spencer watched as Audrey moved among the people, offering not just material goods but genuine kindness. She knew everyone by name, asked about their children, and seemed to truly care about their struggles. Spencer's usual cynicism felt out of place here. He tried to mimic her warmth but found it awkward, like trying on a new suit that didn't quite fit. Yet, the sincerity in Audrey's actions made him want to try. He handed over a set of winter coats to a mother of 3, his awkward smile met with a grateful nod. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the sun began to set, Spencer felt both exhausted and strangely fulfilled. Audrey's quiet strength had begun to inspire him in ways he couldn't fully grasp yet. As they walked back to the mansion, the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was a silent acknowledgement of something deeper forming, a connection that neither had anticipated but both were starting to embrace. Over the next few days, Spencer and Audrey's interactions became more frequent and less formal. The tasks surrounding his grandmother's estate were far from complete, but Spencer found himself strangely unbothered by the lingering workload. It was in the shared moments with Audrey, small talks in the kitchen, quiet walks through the garden, that he felt a peace he hadn't known in years. One morning, as they prepared for a community event to honor his grandmother, Audrey noticed Spencer struggling to tie a knot in the decorations. "Here," she said gently, stepping closer and taking the ribbon from his hands. Their fingers brushed, and Spencer felt a spark that was both surprising and oddly comforting. Audrey's touch was warm and steady, her movements confident yet gentle. "Thanks," he muttered, feeling a bit embarrassed by his own clumsiness. "You're welcome," Audrey replied with a smile. "You know, you're not as hopeless as you think. You just need more practice." They both laughed, and Spencer realized how rare such moments of levity had become in his life. There was something refreshingly simple about Audrey's presence. No pretenses, no hidden agendas, just a genuine kindness that was becoming harder for Spencer to resist. As the day of the event drew near, Spencer found himself more invested than he'd anticipated. He and Audrey worked tirelessly, setting up tables, arranging flowers, and preparing refreshments. "Your grandmother would have loved this," Audrey said, her voice filled with a mix of pride and nostalgia. Spencer paused, looking at her with a sudden intensity. "I hope so," he said, his voice softer than usual. "She was the one person who believed in me even when I didn't." Audrey's gaze softened. "And she still does, Spencer. I think she'd be proud of who you're becoming." The words lingered between them, and for a moment, Spencer felt a deep sense of vulnerability. He wanted to say more, to express the growing affection he felt, but words failed him. Instead, he let his actions speak. During the event, he made a conscious effort to engage with the townspeople, taking cues from Audrey on how to be genuinely present. He listened to their stories, offered sincere gratitude, and even found himself enjoying the simplicity of it all. As the sun set and the community event came to a close, a slow, gentle melody began to play. Spencer noticed Audrey standing alone by the garden's edge, her face illuminated by the soft glow of string lights. On impulse, he approached her. "Dance with me?" he asked, his voice hesitant but hopeful. Audrey hesitated, then nodded, a shy smile crossing her lips. They swayed slowly, the night air filled with a mix of awkwardness and an undeniable chemistry. The closeness, the warmth of Audrey's body against his, was unlike anything Spencer had experienced in a long time. It wasn't just attraction, it was a sense of belonging. Without thinking, Spencer leaned in, brushing a tentative kiss against Audrey's lips. It was brief but filled with all the unspoken emotions he had kept hidden. He pulled back quickly, his heart racing. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though there was no regret in his voice. Audrey's cheeks flushed, but there was a softness in her eyes. "You don't have to apologize," she replied quietly, a mix of surprise and understanding in her tone. As they separated, the weight of the moment settled between them. Spencer was both elated and terrified, elated by the possibility of real love and terrified by what it might cost him. The pressures of his family's expectations loomed large, a dark reminder of the life he was supposed to lead. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, but Spencer couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. It wasn't just a kiss, it was the beginning of something more, a possibility that scared and excited him in equal measure. The morning after the community event, Spencer awoke to a familiar yet unwelcome feeling, a sense of looming obligation. His phone was filled with messages from the company's board, each one more urgent than the last. The brief reprieve he had found in the simplicity of his grandmother's estate was quickly being replaced by the relentless demands of his corporate world. As Spencer read through the messages, a particular email caught his eye. It was from his most trusted advisor, James. "Spencer, the investors are concerned. They need to see you back in the city soon. The deal won't hold much longer without your presence." The words felt like chains tightening around his chest. When Spencer joined Audrey for breakfast, the air between them was heavy with unspoken tension. He tried to engage in casual conversation, but the looming weight of his responsibilities made it difficult. "I may need to head back to the city for a few days," he finally admitted, unable to meet her eyes. Audrey paused, her expression neutral, though Spencer noticed a hint of disappointment in her eyes. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice steady. "You have obligations?" Spencer nodded, feeling a mix of guilt and frustration. He wanted to explain, to make her see that it wasn't an easy choice. But how could he? The life he led was complicated, bound by responsibilities he couldn't simply ignore. "It's just temporary," he tried to assure her, though the words felt hollow. The days that followed were filled with more calls and last-minute arrangements. Spencer grew distant, spending long hours in his study and leaving Audrey to manage the estate alone. It was a defense mechanism, a way to protect himself from the growing attachment that threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. Audrey noticed the shift but chose not to confront him. She focused on her work, maintaining her composure even as her heart ached. On the eve of his departure, Spencer stood by the window watching Audrey tend to the garden. He felt a surge of longing and regret, but also a deep-rooted fear. Could he really abandon everything for love? Could he let go of the legacy that had defined him for so long? Audrey approached him, her steps hesitant. "So, you're leaving tomorrow?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with underlying emotion. Spencer nodded, unable to hide the conflict in his eyes. "Yes, but I'll be back, Audrey. I promise." She offered a sad smile, the kind that carried more understanding than he deserved. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Spencer," she said softly. "But don't come back unless you're certain about what you want." Her words cut deep, a painful truth that Spencer wasn't ready to confront. The next morning, he left without looking back, feeling a hollow sense of loss as he drove away from the estate. The city's skyline, usually a symbol of power and success, felt cold and indifferent as he returned to his corporate world. Back in his office, surrounded by luxury and wealth, Spencer was inundated by meetings and negotiations. The deal went through just as expected, but the victory felt empty. No celebration or congratulatory handshake could fill the void that Audrey's absence left in his heart. Back in the city, Spencer was immediately thrust into the whirlwind of corporate demands. Meetings stretched late into the night, and each conversation was focused solely on profits and expansion. It was the world he had been raised to thrive in, yet it now felt suffocating and devoid of meaning. One night, after an exhausting day filled with business negotiations, Spencer found himself alone in his penthouse apartment. The skyline's lights twinkled coldly through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a sharp contrast to the warm glow of Audrey's small-town world. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the edge of his bed, his mind drifting back to her, the sincerity in her eyes, the way her laughter had filled the quiet spaces of his grandmother's estate, and the kiss that had ignited something he couldn't ignore. He picked up the letter his grandmother had left for him. Her words seemed to echo in his mind. "True happiness isn't about wealth, Spencer. It's about love, connection, and living a life that means something." For the first time, Spencer felt the weight of those words fully sink in. His grandmother had known what he needed, even when he hadn't been ready to admit it to himself. As the realization hit him, Spencer felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. He had been chasing a life dictated by expectations, not by his own desires. The business deal he had just closed felt hollow, its success tainted by the absence of what truly mattered. Driven by a newfound determination, Spencer made a bold decision. He called James, his advisor, and announced his intention to take an extended leave of absence. "I need time to figure things out," he explained, his voice resolute. James was stunned, but Spencer remained firm. For the first time, he was acting on his own terms. The next morning, Spencer boarded a plane back to his hometown. The flight felt both urgent and filled with anticipation. He thought about what he would say to Audrey, how he would make her believe that his return wasn't just a temporary escape but a choice to build a different kind of life. When Spencer arrived at the estate, the sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the familiar garden. He spotted Audrey tending to the flowers just as she had been when he left. His heart pounded as he approached her. "Audrey," he called, his voice unsteady but sincere. Audrey turned, surprised to see him standing there. "Spencer? What are you doing here?" "I made a mistake," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I thought I could go back to my old life, but it's meaningless without you." I don't want the company or the wealth if it means losing you. Audrey's eyes were filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. Are you really willing to let it all go, Spencer? He nodded, stepping closer. Yes. I want a life that's real, one that's built with you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more heartwarming tales with surprising twists, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and let us know in the comments what you thought about the story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one.